how to stay relevant in your niche. Now, there are lots of tips of how to become successful or how to become a public speaker. I've got some of this in my blog as well. I also don't think it's all about success, but regardless. But in any case, there are very few tips of how to stay on top of your industry or how to retain the attention that you've got, which is equally important for different cases. If you're trying to become, again, a public speaker, a consultant, someone else, you get to some type of fame, you get some exposure, whatever be it, maybe getting an influx of clients or the attention that you need for a while, but it's really hard to retain it over a continuous period of time. Now, I'm also going to start with another disclaimer. It's really problematic if you just get annoying for the audience. There's a very fine line between being helpful and being supportive for your clients and for your audience, and then being the guy or the gal that always shows up in all the conferences and is just everywhere and is just being obnoxious, right? But again, it's something that everyone has to define and decide for themselves. What really matters here is discussing the best steps and the best practices of staying relevant in your niche. Or in other words, the subtitle is how to keep the buzz going. Number one is stay ahead of the game. One of the important things that you need to recognize is that in order for you to be recognizable, in order for you to be helpful, you need to stay ahead of your game. Whenever you get invited to conferences, whenever you get invited to different panels or podcasts or so forth, the hosts, the organizers are trying to get to you because you have something to tell. This something to tell is something that is unique, something that is important, something that is relevant, and is contributing to the conversation. Unless you are ahead of the game, unless you are innovating, unless you are covering the latest stories, testing the latest best practices or whatever be it, or just experimenting, you're not going to be a topic of attention for very long, or you're just going to recycle the same old stories over and over again. Now, don't get me wrong, you can still do without this. Again, sometimes experience just matters. You can be the historic person who shares the best practices based on their experience over the past 20 years. I've done that myself as well, but it's just not the same. You're just not giving a head start to the people you're speaking with, which is why you're probably getting fewer media opportunities and fewer chances to really get the exposure that you need so that you can stay ahead in your PR events as well. Number two is balance R&D with visibility. Again, if you agree with this, if you recognize the fact that innovation is important, which means that you need to spend a lot of time in the lab, doing experiments, testing out new concepts, reviewing dashboards and analytics for your clients, trying to figure out what works and what doesn't, conducting field studies or anything else. You're spending a lot of time actually in the business, which is fine. Again, you need to be a practitioner. Even if you're a manager, even if you're an executive, you still need to be a practitioner in order to understand what works and what doesn't. Now, the tricky part here is that the more you're being a practitioner, the harder it is to actually spend the time you need to allocate on buzz, on answering questions or interviews, PR, podcasts, and that kind of stuff. So balancing these two parties is really important. Now, what I recommend other people, because this is something that happens with me as well. Now, there are certain event seasons like March through May, and then let's say October and November that are really heavily packed with events. Now, January and February are usually quiet. Summer is usually quiet, even though some podcasts are happening there. But like on an annual basis, the spring and the autumn season are pretty active, farther from holidays, farther from kind of other events across the world. So that's why they're heavily intense. Now, the problem is that this also happens to be, for the most part, overlapping with the heavy business season when sales is happening, when other things are happening. So most of the time, how I try to position that and say, okay, like January, February going to be quieter, summer is going to be so-so, but like January, February, we also don't have that much new business. So I'm spending the vast majority of my time on R&D work and on writing work and documenting and learning and exploring and that kind of stuff, because I know that I don't have that much sales to do. I probably won't do that much more recruitment. And at the same time, I'm not getting that many PR opportunities. And at the same time, for the busy seasons when sales and PR are going hand by hand, like this past October, I had probably 6 different conferences within a month, virtual events and workshops and webinars and that kind of stuff, within the heaviest sales season with 14 high-profile blue chip leads, right? So trying to balance this out and saying, hey, like I can allocate 1 or 2 hours every week on PR opportunities or interviews and these kind of things, just spreading them out so that they're skill scheduled, I don't miss opportunities, but I also don't overwhelm myself either. So balancing these two things is super important. Make sure you do that as well. Number 3 is regular PR work. Again, it's kind of adding on top of 1 and 2, but try to seek and try to not forget that in order to stay ahead, you also need to be visible. One of the best ways to be visible is just spending more time and attention on PR work, which is media exposures, guest posts, roundups, interviews, networking opportunities, conferences, everything else that kind of matters. Now, there are some strong seasons, as we just discussed, but for some of those opportunities, you don't really have to be as active. For example, in the quad seasons, as I mentioned, say January, February or so, in the quad seasons, you can actually see more opportunities in the form of guest posts, or you can probably work on a top spectacular piece, which is kind of showing and exposing your R&D work to the public and then generating some buzz for yourself, even through press releases or something else to get the ball rolling. This way, your exposure efforts are not going to stay in vain, and you won't have huge gaps of 3 to 4 months where you almost post nothing, where people more or less forget about you, and then a sudden rapid rush of lots of different stories going on. Because again, you can recognize that in other experts that you're following, like top brand influencers, they're always on a call, they're always on a podcast, they're always on this. Some of those things are scheduled ahead of time, some of those things are planned, some of those things are recycled, old events just resurfacing again. But in any case, you keep that in mind and try to replicate that so that there's some cadence, there's some regularity in this. Number 4 is give back to your community. Now, you can be an influencer, you can be lots of other things, but it's really hard to just be someone working with the enterprise, just being very inspirational at the same time, someone who doesn't give back to the community. Because even people like Tony Robbins, who's working with presidents and with like the best talent out there, has tons of free video out there, has books, he has lots of other things accessible to his fans, right? Same goes to, say, Simon Sinek, who's again working in kind of different environment. Now, you don't have to target your fans as your customers, but you need to respect them and you need to appreciate them and you need to give them a reason to keep following you and sharing you and advocating for you. So definitely give back to your community through content, videos, or free, if you're a developer, free software, free research, free some other stuff that they can gain from you and they can learn from you and just use as a resource. Number 5 is, again, a complement to these resources. Create freebies that scale, which means evergreen content and link-worthy content and other stuff that can grow your brand. Because your brand and your popularity comes from your existing network and your existing name, but needs to expand further. So you need to both nurture your existing contacts, people that know about you, and build new contacts, and at the same time try to gain some organic visibility through search engines, through backlinks, through other co-ops, based on your existing content or your existing resource. Which is why you have to create these freebies, you have to nurture your audience, your existing customers, and have a place for your new followers. And it gets a very complicated mix. So unless you create content that also scales, that gains organic visibility over time, organic links, organic email subscribers or whatever, it's going to be harder for you. And I just recorded a video for content marketing tips for 2021. Also make sure you check this out because it's very relevant to this topic. Number 6 is stay engaged with your peers. I'll be honest here, this is the part I'm neglecting the most, and I've spent years trying to just create a cadence, trying to create a kind of calendar or a Slack community with people I respect, with content creators that I respect, other entrepreneurs and networkers and other people that I respect. It's really hard, and if you have any tips, definitely do let me know, tools or systems or so to keep in touch with the important people. But in any case, I do know how important this is because you cannot do this alone. You do speak at events, oftentimes with more or less the same people, lots of other people doing similar stuff for the same communities. The best thing you can do is just boost each other's or one another's brand and help each other and participate in co-hosted webinars and do lots of other campaigns together and just keep in touch with them and help each other. Could be link building, could be resharing and re-promoting new products, new posts, could be reusing email lists together and spreading the word. Content communities, almost like in social networks, they call them sharing pods, groups of people that share each other and like each other. That's extremely important when you get to a status of someone who's like a known figure in a specific industry. So definitely make sure you utilize that. Also, it shows a sign of progress, commitment, of mutual respect for other community members. Definitely something that's super, super, super important and can be extremely valuable for you. Number 7 is network regularly with your own audience. Why is this one important? Because your audience and your followers and your fans are actually the people who made you you. Whenever I get invited to certain conferences in some niches, the organizers say, we would be happy to have you because you have, an audience of people who would enjoy this event and you're kind of going to market this event, right? So your followers are extremely important, and event organizers and journalists and everyone else are recognizing that. Whenever I submit for a guest post somewhere or something like that, they always ask me, how many followers you have here and there and here and there. It's not just about the influencer status, because I don't consider myself such. It's more about media has to convert. They have certain targets to hit, meaning that they need some organic volume or they need some loyal fans to just share and like and read, which most of the time means watching ads on the site or sharing so that other people can watch ads. It's just how business works. So again, your creative perspective matters, because without it, you won't have followers. But at the same time, your followers matter just as much, because without them, you wouldn't get the traction. And it's kind of a catch-22, Unless you have followers, you can't really generate new ones. But if you have them, it's like the wheel keeps spinning because they keep reading your content. It's almost like a snowball just falling through the mountaintop. So network regularly with them, try to connect with them. That's why I love my email list, because this way people can reach out to me and respond. Social media as well, even though not everyone just engages as much there, even though it's easier on Twitter, especially on LinkedIn too. Just try to engage with them, try to speak with them, try to mention them in your posts, try to do polls or other surveys or questionnaires. It's really important to just keep them engaged so that they know you care about them. Number 8 is collaborate and co-create. Try to create mutual pieces of content. Your favorite artists are probably co-creating. Your favorite musicians are probably doing feats with other musicians. Your favorite, marketers are running co-studies with people. Your favorite developers are probably, peering up to build the same app. Collaboration is important, because we as individuals are just not enough, or not sufficient, are not always helpful. And of course, we as a group, we as a team can create more enriched content, better, high quality, more comprehensive, covering different angles, and also reach a broader audience. A bit earlier, that's why I mentioned mutual email blasts or webinars or other events, because you reach a broader audience, you still have the same target ecosystem, and it still delivers the best results possible. So again, you can also consider starting a podcast or starting a webinar series with guests, just to keep yourself motivated to both have a new marketing channel and at the same time collaborate with other peers. It's just kind of the easiest way to make it work. Or if you have an assistant, you can also just put this on their calendar so that you can team up and pair with other people, and just they can even do outreach for you. Hey, like, you want to pair up with Mario or with John or with whoever else. It's just a quick way to do that too. Number nine is analyze and gather feedback. Whatever you do, especially if you want to stay on top, if you want to be recurringly successful, so to speak, you have to analyze and gather feedback. You have to see what works. Look at your analytics, look at your comments, look at your shares, backlinks, anything else, in order to figure out what works and what doesn't. Now, some of your pieces are going to be outcasts in a good or a bad way. Some of them are going to be wildly successful just because they're viral stories. Some of my top pieces are highly contradictory from back in the day, just landing on top of Hacker News or some other source or Reddit. That doesn't mean this is the type of content I want to read or write. continuously, but it still gives some indications of what people react to, what is my top audience reading, and so forth. So analyze that, read your competitors, talk to your peers, talk to your followers, check your comments on social and everything else, and just see what works and what doesn't. Gather topic ideas and headlines and other things, and just try to get the ball rolling for as long as possible. And number 10 is stay laser focused on your niche or your audience. Now there's a twist here. When I say or your audience, there's something very important that is applicable to certain industries and some people have a really hard time understanding. Because most of the time, and like almost all the time, I say, you need your buyer persona, you need your target audience, you need your ecosystem, you need to know who is the ideal person you're building content for, right? And again, that's extremely important. However, in some cases, especially if you work with, say, juniors, especially if you're a teacher, a presenter, a promoter, something like that, you start with an audience, and a couple years in, this audience has evolved and has moved on. Again, mind my words, just recollect what I'm saying right now. If you are teaching those juniors and in 2 years they're no longer juniors, your content is no longer applicable. So when I say laser focused on niche or audience, you have two options here. You either stay focused on the niche and just take on the next wave of juniors, or you try to somehow expand and keep up with your audience so that you can still lead them through the journey in a continuous period of time. Both are possible, but just keep in mind that at some point, especially if you're working with less experienced people, they are going to grow up and get to a point where your initial resources are no longer going to work. So they can either stay your fans but not readers, or you need to figure out a way to exploit that. Just pick one of those two, because you can't really ignore either, and get comfortable with it and make sure that your content stays ahead of the game. So that's it for the most part. If you get some traction, could be a PR buzz, could be a featured show somewhere, could be something else. Or, if you just spend a year working on your brand, working on freebies and conference and so forth, and you're having a hard time just retaining that attention over time, those are some of the best tips that I have to give so that you can still stay ahead for the most part. And at the same time, you can still keep working. You don't have to put a lot of time or a lot of attention on this. There are ways to automate it with tools, especially for social media, with your assistant, just helping out in a sense of, supporting your activities, or someone at the office, maybe the marketing department, just helping out. But in any case, with little effort, you can still retain that attention. You can still keep in touch with other creators and so on, and prolong this period of getting more opportunities over time. Because using these opportunities, the most important thing is you can still kick back some of that to your business, or unlock new opportunities, or even test new channels, new strategies, new services even. So this is why it's really worth the time and attention to make it work.